Okay, welcome back from the break, everyone. So now we're here for the second half of our SWAC meeting. I'm going to jump right into what is section 7 in the plan. These are the public education proposed enhancements. These are really important, as you know, because in order for any of the recycling or source reduction or other efforts to work, you've got to have the appropriate public education in place. And so we've got a list of enhancements here. The first one has come directly out of the SWAC, and it's promoting that true cost of solid waste programs. There's been a lot of talk about how important it is to promote that. The public needs to have a better understanding of what it really does cost, and then that will cascade into hopefully just a little bit more appreciation and approval of other future programs. The next one is another one that we discussed in some of the previous meetings, and this is enhancing the existing school kind of 3R program. I know that there's work that's already being done there, but that's really enhancing it and trying to focus on some problem areas like paper and things like that. Third is evaluate a food waste comprehensive program and use compost and food waste survey results to help guide those needs. So there's been some really great work that the county team and volunteers have been doing to do surveys, and we want to make sure that those results and information is factored into this these comprehensive programs. Similarly, the business survey process to advertise education needs and focus areas, and then target businesses that may require technical assistance. The next one involves some really great work on those great image-based posters that the county has been recently using. It's increasing the number of those and then adding some more videos. These videos are intended to focus on different topics that have been problematic, and it would just be kind of a simple, like almost like a public service announcement, a how-to video, real short. It would be on the website, but hopefully it's an easy way to address some of the issues that come up from time to time in various portions of the system. Next one is promoting the state green recognition program. This is in line with taking some programs that are already in place and kind of trying to use that momentum and just building on it by having the county kind of link up with some of those things and promote them. The next one is a slightly different take on something we have talked a little bit about previously. You may have heard of master recycling programs. Recycling block leader programs are essentially very similar, and this is talking about developing and supporting one. And what this really, the difference between a master recycling program and a recycling block leader program is the emphasis is really on kind of the neighborhood or the circle of influence that person has. And so it's using folks that would want to be part of this program to go out and promote to their circle of influence, concepts about source reduction and recycling and things like that. There are successful programs. We found one in Minnesota. There's others in the country. There's lots of successful master recycling programs. So it's really kind of pulling from the programs that we think would be the best for the county and creating something. Potentially this could be something that the zero waste group might want to be part of or help advocate for, but that would be figured out as we went along. Oh, I just sneeze, sorry. And then expanding the funding for public outreach and education, and then hiring that additional staff member that we talked about. So we've got all of those strategies listed in the table. Many of these don't have a cost, and just as a reminder, that is because the cost is really associated with more staff time and an additional staff member, which is separately factored in on this item 35. All of these things do require additional staff time though. And then we've got a cost in here for production of the more image-based posters and videos, because that would probably require a little bit of outside assistance too. And then we've broken out the funding piece for more funding for public outreach, and then for that additional staff member.
And Allison, you had your hand raised?
Just because the slide wasn't showing now, here it is.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with all the costs and everything.
You can see it now, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this one? Jesse, I know you do a lot of education and work with schools and such. Do you have any thoughts on any of these?
I'm just wrapping my head around it.
Okay, no worries.
I'll be sure to raise my hand when relevant thoughts come up.
Okay, how about anyone else? Just regarding some of possibly the policy change, or Ben, I know you were a big proponent of promoting the true cost of solid waste programs, that discussion earlier.
Yeah, in order to do that, I think we need to there's some work involved in that. It's not just a message, it's actually developing the materials. I think sometimes when we discuss it internally, it's not even necessarily 100% clear what all the costs are relatively. And that's not a criticism at all. The data is good on the solid waste side. It's more just trying to think about it from the consumer perspective and present it in a way that's meaningful to them at an individual level.
Mm-hmm. I wonder maybe then, instead of just having the cost for the staff time, we might need a little outside assistance, kind of like the image-based posters and videos, to put something together that could be used. We might want to add a little bit of that.
Jesse, I see your hand up now.
I was wondering if you could quickly touch on line item 30, use a business survey process to advertise education needs.
Yes, so some of those business surveys that were recently conducted, and I think both Keola and some volunteers were part of that. There was a variety of questions that were asked about certain materials, and so that would be like using those results, figuring out if a business needed particular technical assistance in a certain area, and so it's really kind of targeting who needs what kind of help, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the State Green Recognition Program, is that an existing state of Hawaii program that that's launched?
Correct.
And is that for businesses?
I'm trying to remember the details about that.
Yeah, it's a DBED has had a program. It's been going on for a really long time, and it's focused on Oahu, and so we just wanted to see how we could instead of reinventing a wheel here on Kauai that was focused only on solid waste, that would take a lot of effort, that we could just push people toward the state program.
Mm-hmm. And I asked because I've been working with one business in particular on the south side of the island, Brenicke's beach restaurant, broiler, and as well as a few other ones less formally, and who are taking kind of pretty impressive strides towards waste reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And they've expressed a desire to be a green business and to be a model for a green business, and to and one, they want support, whether it be from the county or people like Zero Waste Kauai, and then they want to push that out to other businesses and provide their data and their experiences of going from 3 dumpsters, I think it's 3 dumpsters collected per day, maybe 3 dumpsters every few days, to getting down to, they're almost down to 1 dumpster a day.
Wow, that's great. Well, are they part of the, the Surfrider has the
They are.
friendly restaurant business, or was business friendly restaurants or whatever? So they're doing that one.
Yeah. Ocean Friendly and then Foam Free. They're part of that, but
Okay.
But yeah, that next level. So there's an opportunity there for whether it be Kauai or for this Green Biz program.
Yeah, that's always been the case. Like, I've been working here for 20 years, and it's always been something that we, knew could enhance business waste diversion without creating mandates and legislation. It's just been very hard to get the staffing around it.
Of course.
So that's why we want to work on the state one.
I would also say too that, you know, if you have the recycling block leader program, there's nothing stopping businesses, you know, to be part of that too, as far as, you know, business owners or anything. And so maybe that is another way to share some of the learnings and, you know, promote it to other businesses as well. So that's a separate one, but since the recycling block leader program is there, I'm curious if any of the other industry members on SWAC, like Howard or Brad, have additional thoughts on, you know, things that we could be doing from your perspective from public education.
Breaking in real quick in the chat, Ben added a comment. He can share info on the DBED Green Biz program and would be happy to help connect to customers. And there's also a few local businesses who've been successful with it, including the Cliffs in Princeville.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
So yeah, it sounds like there's
that into our write-up as well.
He's been with the Office of Economic Development, so he's linked up with the state's economic development. So thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Howard's got his hand up. Awesome.
Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, just from our perspective, and I think reaching out to large businesses in general, and you know, offering diversion type or recycling options, whatever it might be, business, you know, waste stream evaluation would be helpful.
Yeah. So we do offer that as a service, a free service. We don't get a lot of takers on that, but we definitely have the capacity to do that.
Well, possibly some outreach to let people know you have that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I skipped one, I'm sorry. We're on this is section 8 of the plan. It's the materials marketing proposed enhancements. And so this section of the plan, just to give you a little context, you know, you talk about the recycling and bioconversion and such in the previous sections in section 4, but this talks a little bit about markets and things that you can do to really promote market development, and particularly like on island markets. And so that's where this section is around. So the first item is exploring potential for plastic processing innovations. There has been some, you know, news in the local news about the bifusion blocks. There's lots of other potential plastic processing innovations that are coming up all the time. And so it's really just exploring those potentials and seeing if there's anything that would be feasible for the county to actually conduct. A lot of them, you know, they are not quite the right size, or they haven't been proven in certain locations, but just taking another look at what might actually work for the county. The next is advanced county recycled product purchasing policy. We've got evaluate on-island recycling opportunities and issue RFPs for select materials, promote the state national compost standards, improve county use of recycled glass, organics, and other recycled products, promote enhanced state and federal market development efforts and funding, and seek to restructure the advanced disposal fee glass recycling program through legislative changes to allow for glass as landfill cover. I'll advance to the next slide. We've got all of the strategies still there. Now I know, Lane, we've talked a little bit about that last one for the landfill cover. Curious if you have any more comment on how that's been structured for the enhancement strategy.
I don't have any new information on that. I mean,
okay.
It's a little bit related to my comment on the correction on the last meeting's notes, because that approval was not for landfill cover.
Okay. We need to update that then.
Yeah. Another thing is that we did actually, Garden Isle Disposal, we did a project with them where they provided us with crushed glass so that we could use on the landfill roads, just like They are able to offload a lot of their recycled crushed glass for construction projects, and it's like for mud abatement and for fill and all these other purposes that we thought we could use at the landfill. And it turned out that our landfill crew weren't excited about the product. They said that they were concerned about the dust. Which I'd never heard before, but we don't want to endanger anybody or have anybody uncomfortable, so we just stopped the project at that point. So maybe we could just limit this, since we know that our landfill guys aren't wanting to work with glass, and that the state is concerned about the cover issue. We could just pull that out and just talk about changing the ADF, which would be really important if we can want to continue recycling glass. I don't know if Lane has comments on that, but those fees haven't been changed since it was the law was put into place in the 70s, was it, Lane?
We took it over from the city in the 90s.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
the original law was really old, maybe.
Yeah,
but anyway, those fees are very low considering the cost of processing glass. And then we can't participate because we can't do a buyback. It just doesn't, the figures don't work out for us and our recycler. So, we can't even take advantage of those fees, of the grant funds. We do pass it on to the other counties, which we're happy to do that, but we'd like to have some.
I'll just note that, the fee, the ADF hasn't been increased, since the start of the program, but it's not for a lack of trying on our part, DOH's part. We have gone in multiple times, with admin bills to attempt to raise it, but the net effect is just gotten us audits of the program.
Oh, no.
And I mean, it's like any other fee or tax. I mean, the ledge is generally resistant to increasing any existing fee. And I also note that, there's a similar recommendation in the city and county's plan to, support an increase of the ADF at the ledge.
Right. Okay, so maybe we need to change how that one is written slightly. Any other comments or questions? Anybody else from industry have some ideas?
So this is Ben. I'm not sure if we want to promote a national compost standard, just because those things are, so regionally specific.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly state seems appropriate. I'm not sure if anyone wants to have that discussion or enlighten me as to why we might want.
I'm thinking about that now too. I'm not sure where that national piece came in. Possibly more along the quality standards nationally, but definitely state standards should be state specific. Good comment. All right, I'm gonna move to the next topic. Dan, I think this one is yours.
All right, let me run through the facility side of the plan, transfer stations and landfill. There's, as we've mentioned in our prior meetings and a bit today, there's some improvements that are currently in progress to all 4 of the refuse transfer stations. And the design package has been prepared, and the county's waiting on a $14 million loan from the state revolving fund. And if you aren't familiar with it, the state revolving fund gives very low rate interest rates for public infrastructure. So they're worth waiting for if you can get them. So that's going to be the key to getting construction rolling. But the anticipation is that that will be secured, and construction could start at Hanalei in October of 2020 and the Hui in April of next year. Some of the improvements, a lot of it is dealing with stormwater, so waste isolation and containment, getting stormwater diverted, improving traffic and material flow and leachate. So it's really about the flow of people and water on the stations to manage it more effectively and more efficiently. Next slide. So in addition to those, there's 2 additional proposed enhancements listed. The first one is more of an efficiency question, and is something that would be evaluated with all the demands on funds. Closing the transfer stations for a day is something that has been considered. We estimate the cost savings of moving to a 6-day per week operation is about $350,000 a year. So there's a number of logistic issues, outreach issues that have to happen to make a policy like that take effect, but that's something that would be considered. And there's some ongoing staff training that could be enhanced. Pressurized tanks, it seems like we're hearing this more and more from a lot of places. They're becoming more of an issue, making sure operators are fully aware of how to handle some of the commercial restrictions, used oil, pressurized tanks, putting a little more emphasis on some of the staff training. Next slide. So this one is short and concise compared to some of our other implementation tables, but again, the big one
Dan?
is, yes.
Sorry, quick break in. So there's a comment in the chat, given that the stations are primarily for residential use, was there a discussion about which day of the week to close, a weekday versus on Sundays?
That's a great question. Allison, I don't know if we've always referred to Sundays, and I think that is a good question. Why not, Wednesday?
Because we do our residential refuse collection on Wednesday. And also, so this is the thought, is that if we close on Sunday, we can close all the transfer stations and we can close the landfill. Because we don't have commercial running on Sundays, we don't pick up trash, everything can be closed, and that would be the most cost savings. Of course, residents wouldn't have the Sunday to dump. But when I'm here working on the weekends, we get so many calls on Sundays where people don't know if we're open anyway, which shocks me because, it's just strange to know that people don't know when we're open. We get calls all the time. So I just think Sunday would have we have to analyze this, of course. And so we're going to be doing counts to see, how much we disrupt residents. But honestly, our commercial customers are very important to us. We wouldn't want to close on a weekday, or even they work on Saturdays too. So it would really have to be a Sunday.
Well, Allison, let me explore that a little bit. We could take it offline too. But if it were just the transfer stations, the lion's share of that waste is residential, and you wouldn't be able to close the landfill. But maybe that's a sub option. I don't know if the county would entertain that, but you could close the transfer stations on a weekday. Well,
we use the transfer station to accept waste from all of the refuse collection that we pick up from households, and then they transfer that. So that's actually the majority of the waste. Yeah. So that we're not driving trash trucks all the way from Honolulu to the Keikaha landfill. So the majority waste is from, from the trash trucks.
Yeah, I just wasn't aware of the sequencing of exactly how your routes go, if there's a way to strategically close stations on days they aren't used as often. But and we've done that with other jurisdictions where with multiple transfer stations, one is closed on a Tuesday and one on a Thursday, and so forth.
Yeah. Another thing with that, people get used to it, but public messaging about different days and closures, we have that with the High Five program, is very difficult. People it takes them so long to learn something. No offense, public, but that they're still referring to facilities that are 10 years old with the old name, or they think of programs there from 10 years ago. So keeping things as consistent as possible without too many fluctuations is really important too.
And you have some segment of the population that wouldn't even know you're open on Sundays, right?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
Okay, other comments? Okay, let's move on to landfill, Keikaha landfill. It is a Subtitle D compliant lined landfill. And there's two cells, cell 2A and 2B, and for some reason 2B is starting first. I don't know how that happened, but things like that do occur. But it was a horizontal expansion that's currently underway. They are now accepting waste in that, and the estimate, the latest one that we've heard is, between 7 and 8 years of capacity remaining at the landfill. So the future disposal solution is uncertain, and section 10 we'll get to next. We'll talk about some of the options that are available. The county has kicked off a landfill mining feasibility study. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's we're anticipating results of that to be available in early to mid 2021. The thought process being there, and this is not this has been done elsewhere. You can mine an old landfill, sort out the fine screened materials, use that for cover, perhaps recover some materials for recycling. Well, that's fairly challenging, but you get a lot better compaction when you're done. Reline the landfill and get it some additional capacity. So that'll be something that's currently under investigation.
So we have two comments, one from Allison and one from Scott. Maybe Allison, maybe you could go first. You might clarify something. Oh, you're on mute.
Quickly to clarify, I'm sorry, cell 2A start accepting waste first, and cell 2B, so this is a wrong note. Sorry about that. So 2A and 2B are both open and accepting waste now.
Okay.
Pardon?
Oh, okay.
That's all.
And Scott, you had a question?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate time for it, but regarding the landfill itself, I wish that we could address the initial problem, which I think is the most important problem at this time, in my point of view, is I don't think it's acceptable somehow that they don't have a backup plan for weather, for scale masters, for whatever reasons of the landfill being closed on whatever is the reason for it, and there's no backup plans. And we as a hauler for our customers have to figure out what we're going to do when we have their compactor on our back or something, and then they tell us the landfill is closed. And I don't know, I'm not sure why I know that we have limited space, but why is there not a backup plan, like maybe a section for bad weather where you can bring in the product or whatever? I mean, what do we do? It's I mean, to me, it poses a health hazard, for your hospital, your hotels, your restaurants when they all reopen. But we run into this problem more often than not. I don't want to be a complainer, but it really is a pain to try to deal with it. And I think it's a problem that if you try to be more efficient, how do we avoid this?
That's a good question. I know that the climate on Kauai causes, had the flood recently and other challenges. Allison, has there been any thought about this particular issue and ways to deal with it?
Scott has a really good point. One big reason for closures in the past was that we had a compactor that was down all the time. We do have a new compactor. I think I looked at, we did record all the days that we were closed because of the compactor breaking down, and that is not going to be a problem anymore because we have a new compactor and we are working on a backup compactor. But I don't mean to minimize the concern that, you should be open to customers so that they can do their routes. So like you said, weather is an issue, and then sometimes we've had scaling issues, but I'm hopeful that the majority of the closures have been solved at this point. Not to say that it's not something we should be working on, and maybe we can make notes in the plan and work on that too.
Allison, that analysis you did, does it indicate why the landfill was closed each time it was closed? That might be a nice little summary table or something, if you can say that you've addressed some problems, and we could maybe include that in the existing section or something.
Yeah, we could do more research on that. That's okay. Good. My list was specifically related to the to the compactor being broken, but there were other reasons too,
High
like
winds.
what, Scott?
High winds.
High winds.
Yeah, high winds, we really can't do anything about that. But so Scott, you're saying that there should be a place to put the waste no matter what.
Well, we would hope that, you know, if it's a lower area because a high wind is affecting you up high, or, you know, someplace that is set aside, like a section that even if it's raining, that you can still come in, you know, or can we be like the county and can we go to the transfer stations and dump our loads there and, you know, pay, just track, I mean, you know, we can scale our own things. We have a truck scale here that, you know, I've thrown out a lot of suggestions along the way just because it just poses such a big problem for our customers, and then they get mad at us.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a great suggestion. We can certainly get in some incorporation into the plan on that.
I also see Keith has a comment on this issue.
Oh, thank you. Keith?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Scott is saying, we are a hauler as well and run into the same challenges as Scott folks when the landfill is closed. And Allison, I think one thing that he's also asking is when Waste Management was managing the landfill, I believe it was part of their contract to provide like a wet weather pad. And so for those days that we have inclement weather, not to the extent where that one time it was however many inches we got, but if like on a normal rain, that there should be an area that has wet weather, whether it be concrete or gravel, like a pad set up specifically, so the haulers have a place to dump. And I know Waste Management was not the greatest in providing that in the past, but that would be something to look into. Therefore, when we do have the normal rain that creates slippery conditions going into the cells, that there may be an area that is designated for, you know, wet weather occasions where the haulers can still get to and dump.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'll move on. Two more things on this slide. The facilities section also includes, you'll see when you get the draft, two additional requirements, state requirements for solid waste management plans. And one is documentation of the county's facility siting process, and then information about the county's designated enterprise zones. So those are both going to be part of section 9, which deals with transfer stations and landfills. It seemed like a logical place to put it for this plan. Next slide. All right, let's talk about disposal options. And the timing of this meeting is interesting, to say the least. We've been a very busy consulting team because we owe, as mentioned, we owe the county our first draft today. So we have been working hard on a number of factors, and many of these are costs. So we don't have them ready for today, but we will shortly. And it would also be something that you'll get in your draft and be able to comment on. Next slide, please. So we have broken out this section into future long-term disposal options and then alternative technologies. So we have, landfill, two landfill ideas. One something on the island of Kauai, and then also waste export, which is sending it obviously off the island. And the on-island options, we've already spoken about mining the closed phase 1 area, the Kakaha landfill, to expand the capacity. And again, this would be going into an unlined section and mining it, coming up with additional capacity, and then adding a new lined cell. So we actually get some improved environmental protection. One of the challenges with landfill mining is, well, what is in the old landfill? And this has been around for a long time. So part of the investigations are to get a feel for what is actually there. So there's a number of potential advantages and some challenges associated with that, but we'll talk more about those in a second. Second option is to develop the proposed Mahalo Road landfill. And there was a environmental impact statement done on this and quite a bit of work. It was eventually stopped because of the initial development cost was pretty high to build that landfill. But it is technically feasible, and there were a number of advantages to it. We'll talk more about them in a minute. And then there was a whole host of other locations noted in the landfill siting study. Those could also be an option. The alternative technologies, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then waste export, two logical places to go. Well, one would be to one of the other Hawaiian islands, or to export to the west coast of the mainland US, which has been investigated before, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So the alternative technologies, there's many ways to slice and dice this. We debated about the best way to organize it, but here we go. Anaerobic digestion, including co-digestion. This is typically done with organics, done with very common at wastewater treatment plants. There are a number of facilities around the world that do this with food waste. And that is something that can be done with a portion of the waste stream. Waste energy, pyrolysis, and gasification are different thermal treatment methods for waste. Aerobic composting of municipal solid waste. So this is different from green waste or source separated. There's a number of facilities around the world that that compost the entire waste stream after any recycling. Mechanical biological treatment, MBTs, really are components of the first three options that are organized in a way that are a little more sophisticated plants. They have a lot of upfront processing and then back-end processing, and they may divide the waste stream into recyclables coming out one end, refuse-derived fuel process for thermal treatment off the other, and then the wet fraction going to anaerobic digestion or composting. And then chemical recycling is another, where there's ways to treat materials chemically instead of biologically. So the plan will cover sort of the advantages and disadvantages of those at a pretty high level. If you could go back up one, Lindsay, I'll go bounce around a little bit. The other main disposal technologies, the landfill options, and then waste energy, we will have range-based cost estimates for these. The ranges are pretty broad on many of them. And I will say off the bat here, the waste export options are bordering on infeasible. We almost didn't include them for a variety of reasons. There was a proposal some years ago. Waste was ready to be sent from Oahu to eastern Washington State. Days before the first shipment, a judge put an injunction on those shipments based on concerns related to invasive species due to a lawsuit filed by the Yakama Nation and some environmental groups. So I think it would be very difficult to bring that up again. We know that there are challenges related to sending waste to H-Power or to Hawaii County, also pretty expensive options. But we thought it was helpful, considering the situation currently with less than 8 years of capacity and no landfill location identified, and it has the support of the administration, to cast a pretty broad net at technology to at least say that the plan looked at them.
Looks like
Okay.
Brad has his hand up, Dan. Brad, you want to have a question or comment?
Yeah, we're finally getting to the part of the discussion.
All right.
Hey, the H-Power issue, and I'm interested to hear a little bit more on why that is perhaps infeasible. Because on the one hand, I read that, and not knowing the details of that deal, but I read an article a couple months ago that City and County of Honolulu is having to pay because they have a minimum take. They have to supply a minimum amount of trash to the H-Power plant, and if they don't, they still have to pay, essentially. Got to pay some penalties for it. And with the impact of COVID, they're not generating as much trash, and so you know, I would think maybe, I don't know if anyone's looked at that offset of what they're having to pay versus, you know, if they didn't have to pay those penalties, and could that somehow subsidize getting some of our waste stream to them? And then going kind of more into the next slide that you had up for a minute, just I'm interested on your guys' knowledge of similar sized, you know, I look at this picture and that's a huge that's a huge plant, and I go, no way that's like not what we would have here on Kauai. But you know, our issue, and I know this from being in the power business here on the island, it's always economy of scale. We're really just a small little town. We don't generate a lot of trash. We don't have the ability to build huge, super efficient facilities that rely on huge volumes. So do you have examples of other places with similar kind of waste volumes where they've been successful in getting a waste to energy plant going? Are there some examples to be learned from that, you know, or are you guys just starting to scratch the surface on this?
No, good comments. The first one related to H-Power, it's my understanding that there is I don't know if it's legislation or a resolution that is barring H-Power from accepting waste from off island. I don't know, Lane, if you have any more information on that. And the capacity that they have available, it's true, they have, as typical with these large facilities, they have what's called a put or pay contract, if you don't know what those are, that, you know, they've committed to pay for a certain amount of base load capacity. And, you know, if they're under that and, you know, COVID is reducing waste streams, then they're paying more on a per ton basis. So in the short term, there is probably an opportunity, but there's a lot of push to not have to build another unit down the road. So if you look at a long-term option, it would be a bit more complex. If it were an easy thing to package up waste and start shipping over there, there may be a short-term opportunity, but I think there's a number of stumbling blocks to do it on the short term. And then secondly,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's one more comment. Secondly, related to small-scale thermal plants, yes, they exist. There's been a couple up in Alaska. The challenge is meeting air quality permits with low-tech operations, because yes, the economies of scale become cost prohibitive. Most of the facilities we see, when you start breaking them down to the size of the waste stream of Kauai, they're just very expensive. They're technically feasible, but they're quite pricey. So in general, you'll find that landfills, particularly for this size of waste stream, are much cheaper than the thermal options, which would then be also much cheaper than a waste export option, because in addition to going to H-Power some other location, you have to get the material into a container, get it to a port, offload it from onto a ship, do that transport, unload it, offload it again, and then get it to another facility. And all those legs add cost. And by the time you're done with that, it gets pretty pricey. So Allison, Keola, had some comments?
Yes, we recently received a request from council about the possibility of shipping waste over to H-Power. So we did touch base with H-Power. That would be our second time in the last couple of years that we did reach out to them. And while they were interested in receiving waste, they do have some roadblocks. Dan, as you mentioned, that they have two. It's an ordinance. Their ordinance doesn't allow them to accept waste from other islands, and then their contract with Covanta doesn't allow it as well. So they need, it's possible, but they would need to do some work in that area. And then another thing is the cost for us, because we'd have to pay their tip fee, which is lower than ours, but still we'd have to transport it there, and we'd have to do, ground transport on both sides. And then at one point, we didn't even get that far in the discussion before we were like, oh, we probably can't do this. But at one point they had talked about us taking back their ash as well. And so that's just a lot of cost for the county. The reason we have it in here as a potential is because we don't have a lot of options right at this second. So if we were in a total bind, maybe we would have to do that, you know, and we definitely need to explore it and continue our discussions with the city county, but it's not something that would be economically feasible or, you know, legally allowable at this time.
Okay, I think Kayla and Lane, I know you had unmuted a while ago, and then we've got a couple other hands. So good, lots of discussion on this one.
You want to go next, Keola?
Nope, I was just clicking through the different buttons and my hand went up by accident.
Okay.
Okay.
How about you, Ben?
So I just want to comment that, you know, I think we have been here several times over the past decade and a half, and maybe perhaps before that as well. And the pattern seems to be assessing the cost of a new landfill and then, you know, immediately kind of turning in reaction to that to other technologies with the presumption that they're somehow going to be less expensive. And the pattern historically has been that they're not, and then we lose time. And so I guess one of the things that's really important to me is going again back to cost transparency, really understanding what is the cost per ton for these options and how does it compare to a landfill, and then does it in fact alleviate the need for the landfill in the first place? So like if we're gonna engage in a conversation, which I think is very important to look at all our options, like whether it's waste to energy or something else, at the front end we should be really clear about how do we benefit from these technologies. So if we just say we want to do waste to energy, can we honestly say that means we now don't have to do the landfill? Or do we have a specific objective as to how long that defers the need for a new landfill? You know, the conversations don't seem to be very tight in the past. And I think we have an opportunity to make those conversations a lot tighter about what our specific goals are with any of these options, as opposed to just throwing them on the table as like random technologies that we could consider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ben, as I mentioned, we will have range cost estimates for all of these. And like I said, waste energy is noticeably more expensive than on-island landfill, and waste export is notably more expensive than waste energy. Waste export is more than waste energy. So we'll at least have some notion of what the cost of these technologies are. And you're right, typical waste energy, you will end up with 20 to 25% of the incoming waste by weight that has to go to a landfill. This is for bypass during maintenance, for unprocessable, uncombustible materials, and then the ash. So you're right, it is not a typical, mass burn or refuse-derived fuel plant does not forego the need for a landfill of some type. In rough numbers, you can say, well, it's about a quarter of what you're putting in today. You'd still need space for.
Looks like Howard has his hand up. Howard?
Yeah, I have, I guess, a couple comments and questions. I guess starting, I don't know if the plan addresses emergency situations, and this kind of goes back to what Mr. Kochi was talking about. First of all, we do have weather incidents that, we have bridges that aren't in the best shape, stuff like that. I don't know if there's any emergency plans in this plan to deal with those sorts of events where we can't transfer the waste, or what I'm mainly thinking about is the biggest solid waste crisis Kauai ever had, and that's Hurricane Iniki. For the better part of 10 years, we were managing remote satellite operations all around the island. And I don't see in this plan that we talk about like a construction or inert landfill option, and that could also address the ash from a waste energy plant as well. And maybe that should be investigated and put on the table, because if we have another Iniki, your 7-8 years of landfill is over. So that's one comment that I don't know if we've really addressed here. something else to maybe look at. I forget what it's called, but I believe Kauai is in an air quality attainment zone, or I forget the exact wording, and maybe the pollution restrictions on very small waste energy plants are not as strict as what you guys maybe have been researching in other municipalities that are non-attainment areas. So yeah, that's about it.
I know that the county does have plans. Back up a little bit. Typically, for right or wrong, and I think maybe wrong in this case, solid waste plans they defer to disaster response plans to deal with emergencies. So it's typically not part of the integrated solid waste management plan. Now, not to say it doesn't have to be, but it couldn't be. But I know that the county does have contingency plans for another major hurricane and locations identified where material could go. I don't know, Allison, if you have any more you could share about that, but I know that that's something that they do have plans for.
Yeah, we work with KEMA, Kauai Emergency Response, and we're constantly being trained. I mean, we had a really good trial run with the Rain 18 event up on the North Shore. Obviously, though, that didn't generate any kind of volume as we saw with the Niki. As far as we do have some potential sites, but that's what we really need to work on are identifying sites where waste would go immediately. But the plan is very broad. We have a lot of information, a lot of good knowledge. We continue to work with FEMA and KEMA and the state and everything. But yeah, that's where the planning for that is in the disaster plan.
I had a couple more comments on the waste to energy, Dan. When you guys do your analysis and look at that as an option, you're coming up with a cost. I mean, there's some very Kauai specific things to remember. First of all, we're already on most days running 100% renewable energy for most of the day. We've gone as long as 9 hours. So we don't have the ability to take any power during the midday period. Most of these types of plants are looking to provide a 24-hour offtake of energy, and so the market isn't really there for a third of the day, roughly. We could take the power at night, but that just jacks the price up even more, I would imagine, on an already expensive small-scale facility, unless you're looking at, for example, repurposing our existing biomass facility, the green energy team facility, where you've already got a turbine generator that's got pretty sizable capacity, and retrofitting the boiler there, and they've already got a contract that could be perhaps renegotiated because that power is already being taken 24/7. So hopefully you guys will sort of dig into some of that type of stuff as opposed to just kind of doing a waste to energy plant in this general size of this volume, and this is the kind of PPA price you expect to get, and it'll be a base load plant, because that's not going to work for us here.
Good comment, thank you.
Lane, did you have anything to add? I think we started maybe asking if you had comments.
Just a couple of small points on the waste to energy and H power thing. So yeah, I think Dan had asked or thought that possibly there's something in statute that might prevent that. There's none that I'm aware of. I guess maybe it was at the county ordinance level that there are barriers on that. And then I'd just like to note that just one other issue that would have to be addressed is on the permitting side, so our permitting system. And I don't think that would be a preventative kind of thing, but it's a procedural kind of thing, right? Since waste is going to be coming from a different source. So incoming waste on the H-Power permit side and permitting for whatever facility on the County of Kauai side that will be prepping and shipping the waste over. And yeah, I just had a quick question on the ash, but Allison addressed that in her comments. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks.
There is one other comment in the chat. It's that a better understanding of the cost delta between a C&D or inert landfill versus a conventional mixed waste landfill would be useful data as part of the cost comparison.
Yeah, one of the things to note is that C&D landfills don't really have much less requirements than MSW landfills. It has to be truly inert materials such as, rock and asphalt and such like that. So there's not too much of a difference really when just broad mixed C&D with wood. That's about all I can comment on right there related to that comment.
Looks like Howard has his hand up.
Yeah, Dan, just to build on that though, the public perception and maybe landowner willingness to host that type of landfill could make a huge difference.
Sure. That goes back to the, in part the disaster response question. And I think it has a big impact on that. You're probably much more likely to find a place to put storm debris in an emergency than to site a new MSW landfills. That's a good point.
It is also an interesting piece of the puzzle if there was a waste to energy solution plus somewhere for those that inert material to go versus having to come up with an alternate MSW landfill and then an alternate inert landfill as well.
Right.
It's good to kind of consider the variety of solutions.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I'm gonna.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I don't see any more hands or comments. So if anybody else was thinking their hand was up, speak now.
Yeah, the next part on the agenda is to advance to the public comment period. So I'd like to give SWAC members one more opportunity at this part of the meeting. If you have anything else, it could be on any slide. We could go back to any of them if you would like. But now is a good time if you'd like to make any more comments from the SWAC members. Ben, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so quick comment. I'm just wondering if goal setting in terms of diversion goals or overall, like what is the pathway? Does that story get told out of this? Because it seems like an assessment of all the options, but I don't know what it's telling us. And I'm wondering if that's just kind of future drafts or if that's something that we have to determine on our own.
So the, section 2 of the plan has information about like waste projections and the anticipated diversion rate that is associated with some assumptions that is included for those projections. There's a couple places throughout the plan that we also have talked about the zero waste resolution and the 70% diversion rate that was part of that. There's some other goals statewide, like the Aloha Plus Challenge has a 70% reduction in disposal by the year 2030. And so we do talk about those different goals throughout the plan in a few places. Now, what we have not done, we have not connected like this strategy will equate to this diversion goal. That's not something that's in this draft, if that's what you were asking.
No, the ask was specifically whether this strategy equates to this diversion goal in the final product, or if that's kind of a further study on our part.
What's your thought on that, Dan?
Yeah, no, it's not typically something where we're going to make a projection of X%, or it has a very the zero waste goal of 70% is quite aggressive, but I doubt this plan is set up to meet that at this stage. But it's certainly something that can be worked on, in the future going forward.
Allison?
Alice?
Yeah, I can tell you that the last plan didn't have a diversion goal, and one difficulty with putting a diversion goal in there is that the diversion goal of a plan would show if every single thing were done, then you'd hit this, right? But oftentimes because of funding or because of staffing, we may or may not be able to implement one or another item, and so we can't hit the goal. And so that's one of the difficulties that we have presenting a diversion goal in the plan, because it's an integrated plan and it has to be fully integrated and fully implemented to hit the goal.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next section, and this is open for public comments. So hopefully, public, you're still there and you're able to unmute yourself. If you're not, please, you can try sending us a chat or raising your hand, and we'll try to figure out what to do. But now is a good time to.
Yeah, we do have a volunteer to start us off. So Ruta?
Hi, thank you. This is Ruta. I'm with Zero Waste Kauai. And first I wanted to say kudos for all the composting that you put in there. That's awesome. We at Zero Waste Kauai would welcome an opportunity for pilot projects. And we think that it's a good time now instead of waiting a couple of years, because now is when a lot of the hotels and resorts are up again and ramping up, and it might be a good time to put a pilot project in somewhere. So maybe if you could keep that in mind. Also, I had a chance to go around to a lot of restaurants in this last year, asking specifically about what they do with their food waste. And I found that there were a lot of them that either were taking them to pig farmers, where the pig farmers were fighting over a restaurant to take the food waste, where other restaurants could not find a pig farmer to take it and did not know what to do with their food waste. So I'm wondering if two things. One is if somehow there could be a broking system that would help one find the other, and the other is this really legal? Because if we want to compost food waste, we have to have a permit in order to receive food waste. And does pig farming need some kind of something to make it more legal? That's it.
No, Allison, do you have any thoughts about that? Those are pretty specific.
Okay, so for the pig farming legality, I know that on Oahu they encourage, they have a food waste reduction law, and they encourage food to be given to pig farming, and they don't have a concern about the legality of that. So that's I find interesting, I don't know if we follow that model, but that's a really big community where they're doing a lot of promotion of pig farming over there. So, Keola, you want to chime in? I see your hand is raised, not by accident, I hope. I think you're muted.
I know this is Lane's wheelhouse and whatnot, but there are rules and regulations for pig farmers. They're supposed to go through the process of cooking their food before serving their pigs, and there's again a process to follow. But our assumption is a lot of the farmers on Kauai are small generators, that the expense of going through the legal process or the required process is cost prohibitive, and nobody's chasing them down to force them to go through the whole process just because one day they may be small, and another is that they're doing a lot of waste diversion, and if we're to discourage that, it's going to impact a lot of different businesses, not only the farmer. but the restaurants and the hotels that they assist with. I'm not saying it's right that that happens, but if we're to go after them just because we want composting as an option, that's going to hurt in a whole bunch of different ways, especially with the composters that are online. Being able to service food waste is very limited, and it is an expensive process that they will have to go through because they're permitted by DOH. So there are rules and regulations, Ruda, but we call it a kind of a shadow industry where we have to let the process take its toll or take its role at some points, just so we're not being impacted overall.
Thank you, Paola. Any comments on my request for starting to compost sooner than 2 years from now?
Rita, this is Dan. One reason we waited a while was in part because of COVID and the budget constraints the county is under. You know, it's going to take some energy and some staff time to get that going. And it just, you know, I don't want to speak for Allison and Kayla, but it just seemed like it was something that probably couldn't happen right away.
It
Allison,
was the tiered regulations.
Oh, and that
Dan.
part too. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and I need to put in just a quick sentence from what John Harder asked of us to make sure you keep in the picture, that there should be more focus on waste reduction, not just what do we do with it afterwards, but how do we not make so much?
Right.
And I think partly that's our job at Zero Waste Kauai, but we're not official, right? And I think in the plan there should be something more about not having so much waste to start with. Okay.
Absolutely. So the develop and implement the recycling block leader program is intended to help support that, because it's, you know, this program would be a formal program that the county would develop and possibly in collaboration with Zero Waste Kauai. And then it would rely on volunteers and people that were interested in promoting more source reduction type topics and activities and habits and everything. So I think that is one item currently in the plan that should help support that.
It sounds like Ben's got some relevant information to add too for the compost projects,
great.
perhaps.
For source reduction, I just wanted to point out that we have the whole section on source reduction. That was what we presented at the top of the presentation too.
Thank you.
So my only addition for Ruda is our normal RFP in July should be out and available. So you should be rounding up partners now if you have, if you have been able to locate some of the visitor industry partners you're talking about, and ask them to consider change in practice and to partner with Zero Waste Kauai. That would make a good grant proposal for us to consider.
Great, thanks, Ben.
Do you see any other volunteers, Elizabeth?
I do not see anyone with their hand raised or anything else in the chat. However, we would welcome anybody else. Oops, now I've raised my hand. Sorry. So yeah, it's really easy, guys. Just pop your hand up if you'd like to chime in.
Any other thoughts?
Is John Harder still on this call?
I think he dropped off.
Okay, because he did email some stuff.
Okay.
He had some comments.
Oh.
So is it okay if I read those, or I don't know. It's not very long.
Sure, I think we have time for that if you don't mind reading them.
Okay. So he says, as Rita said, that it's a time for the plan to lead off with a major focus on waste reduction. propose a method to develop a baseline against you can measure our upfront reduction efforts and include specific elements that can be carried out locally to maximize upfront actions to reduce waste we generate. That's always an issue with waste reduction, is how you measure it, because you don't see it, you don't see the end product or anything. So that's a good point. Another thing he said is the plan should include recommendations, mandates to maximize the diversion of all wet organics from the landfill, get the organics out, detailing the landfill environmental, public health, and economic benefits, especially minimizing methane generation, and making specific recommendations for phased-in implementation. And then finally, he said sustainable materials management and climate change. The plan should include a specific element addressing climate change and the specific greenhouse gas emissions reduction in reduced consumption, both outside of our immediate jurisdiction and within the county. And I think, Jacobs, we did talk about where possible, bringing up sustainable materials management throughout the course of the plan. That's all I have from John.
Okay, thank you. You're able to share those with us too?
Yeah, I can email it to you. I'll forward it to you.
Okay, thank you. That'd be helpful. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay. Well, that does conclude the end of our call, actually. I think I wanted to do one more quick reminder of where we are in the schedule. I'm going to zoom back here to that slide so everybody can see. So we just completed our 4th meeting. We're submitting this first draft, that's the first compiled draft, to the county for review today. SWAC members will be receiving their draft, which will be a slightly different version, improved from the first draft, mid-July. And then we will have our next meeting with you all in mid-September. So thank you all very much for all of your participation, and really appreciate your just help getting through this virtual meeting. I know it's a little different for everybody, but really appreciate everyone's engagement and full participation. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Hope you'll
everyone.
have a great day.
Have a great day. Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.